Welcome to the Temple of Geek Podcast. My name is Monica, and today we are joined by Young Deuces of Geekset. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. The Temple of Geek Podcast has been around since 2012 and is hosted by a variety of geeks from the Temple of Geek team. Here we cover all manner of geek and pop culture news and events. To our returning listeners, thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here. Welcome to the podcast, Deuces. Can you please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. First things first, though. I love your intro. It got me thinking about my podcast. Like, man, we don't give our history, but I love how you guys. I love that intro. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
I go by Young Deuces. I'm 1/4 of the Geekset podcast and the Geekset Collective, and we call ourselves the only podcast that's blend hip hop culture and geek culture together in one place. So one of the reason for the inception of this podcast that we had is that we listen to a lot of podcasts like yours. We listen to a lot of podcasts, and the one thing that we just said, we don't see or we don't have, it's just we didn't see a lot of people that sound like us and look like us. So we wanted to offer that to the geek world, and operating in that world, come find out like what a blerd is, and come to identify as blerds as a black nerd. So it's been amazing because I've been getting to speak with people of the culture, like yourself, and really collaborate and just kind of be in this culture. To geek out is one of my favorite things to do.
Definitely one of our favorite things too. And the thing that I think has been so great about the rise of social media and the rise of things like podcasts is that we can create spaces for ourselves that weren't traditionally there for us before. And we
Yeah.
can elevate ourselves to levels that we wouldn't have gone down, if we had followed the regular, I don't know, the way Hollywood kind of goes as far as like critics and things like that. So being
Hmm.
able to put yourself out there and like creating these spaces for yourself has really, taken shape in the last couple years.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I realized is that I care more about what voices like ours sound like. Because, like you talk about the culture, you talk about just like there's a lot of nuances to like, if you like Marvel for a certain reason because you can relate to like a Peter Parker who's like broke, who doesn't, and he's not like a Tony Stark who's super rich and this and that. So
Right.
like, certain people can like really speak to that
Hmm.
where, in traditional like the way traditional critics have been, you don't really get that.
Yeah.
At least that's how I see it. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got started? How did all of this with Geekset get started?
Well, so with Geekset, it started around the time when Black Panther was running their promos and getting ready to launch, and there was this. So the very very first commercial, it was a group by the name of Run the Jewels that was on the commercial. And for those hip hop heads that listen, Run the Jewels is like a underground, like a hardcore, like really dope lyricist hip hop group. And I thought that was just so big that like hip hop has made it this far, to quote Biggie Smalls, because it was like, this is Disney, this is Marvel, and they chose this group to be on the first commercial. But there was no podcast celebrating this moment. And I was like, how is nobody else seeing this? And then I was talking with, my friends and my friend group, and we would be excited about it. So I was like, we need a place that can highlight these moments like this, like that this hip hop culture understands. And hip hop culture is my first love. It's what I'm passionate about, but I'm also love geek culture. So I was like, man, you know what? There's a lot of similarities to both of these cultures, and I would love to do this. So I made a Facebook status, and I was like, I am thinking about starting this podcast, and I want to do this. Is anybody interested in this? Right? So my two of my co-hosts, Bacardi and Lib, I already knew them from Milwaukee in general. We knew them from the Milwaukee music scene, and so they somebody tagged Bacardi. He was the first person, and so he was like, "Well, what's going on?" I geek out about all this stuff, and I would love to talk about it. And then I already knew my other podcast host, Lib, was a heavy comic book nerd. He was his first album that he put out was called the Wade Wilson Project. So it was like that's when it was there. So we got together literally that like probably that weekend, got together, made some steaks, drunk some whiskey, and talked about how we're going to do this podcast, and then embarked on this journey. And then probably like probably like a quarter of the way through our first year, my brother Didge, he was engineering for us and helping us with the podcast. And you know how podcast goes. At some point, the person behind the camera ends up getting on the mic, and we just gelled so well. And so then we added my brother officially to it. And then ever since then, we just started rocking. We just kept on going.
That's so exciting. And also because it comes from like a place of passion, right? It comes from like, you know, podcasts are not easy. Like it's not
No.
just talking and putting it out there. There's so much behind the scenes stuff that goes on. It's time consuming. Most of the time, everybody has their regular jobs, their regular lives. They have like, this is like something you do out of passion or excitement that you want to grow into something bigger, but it usually starts off as something small, but it's
Yeah.
still a lot of work you have to put in. So how
Yeah.
did you manage that? Like, because it seems like you've been doing so much in just such a short time.
Well, the great thing about having a group or a collective is that you can find out what each individual is passionate about, and it kind of helps alleviate the stress of trying to take on everything by yourself. So, with the way that our makeup is, like you see, I have geek merch on, and every episode and everything that we do, we have our merch on. Bacardi, he is very, very passionate about making sure that our brand looks right. So he's head of merch and he handles that. Video, all the enhancements and all the tips and tricks of the videos. My brother Didge, he watches master classes and he takes the additional time to learn how to shoot things and do things. So it helps us there. And then Lib, he's more of a audio engineer, with music. So he makes sure that we sound right. And so me, I'm more of like the social media marketing person. So I'm making sure that our visuals and we're out there, we have a footprint on the web. So yes, it is very time consuming if you're operating by yourself. We have been fortunate enough to build this team for people who have masters and whatever they wanted, and we are able to delegate, and help that out. But also, it's like we have also like the same track mind. We outside of doing the podcast, we were going to conventions. So now the difference is we're going to conventions and covering it and making content. We were already watching anime. The only difference now is we're watching anime and talking about it on the podcast and covering it. So it's like we took what we do normally and turned it into our job. So it helped out with that time consuming thing. It doesn't feel taxing like, oh, I got to read this or I got to watch this. It's like, I'm already going to be watching this. Oh, this show's coming out. I was already going to watch it. Let's just watch it, and make sure we have podcast content. So that's kind of helped us balance the time.
And that's awesome because then it doesn't feel like work, even though it's definitely super
Yeah.
hard work, right? But like you said, it alleviates it. It doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about like what each of you do? Because I noticed that you had some toy stuff that you guys do. You
Mhm.
also, have had some significant like interviews and celebrity stuff. Can you kind of talk and speak to some of that?
Yeah, so the podcast itself, that's like we call it like that's the Megazord. Like that's when we all come together. That's the one thing. And then what we started doing, we started branching out in just different levels of geekdom to try to figure out like let's create content that people will want to watch. So when the pandemic hit, one of the ideas that I had, I said, you know what, I have a high interest in creators and celebrities and having conversations with them. But the one thing I wanted to do was like I wanted them to geek out. I feel like everybody has like a little side geek in them that they try to suppress. But when you find that person that you can talk to about it, that's when you go crazy. So I was like, I want to create that. I was like, yeah, we can talk about what the projects that they're doing, but like, I love the fact that I was talking with Jay Ellis at the final season of Insecure, but we spent 15, 20 minutes talking about DC, about Blue Beetle, about Batman, like going deep into that. And I was like, you're not going to get that nowhere else. So I wanted to start that interview series 1-on-1 with Deuces. And then Didge, he came up with the idea of like, you know what, it'd be really cool if we do live reactions to some anime. So he came up with this show called Geekset Rewind, where he actually like we'll watch an anime or watch something. We did a couple of the high level movies, but we'll watch it and give our live reaction right there. And it's always a fun time because it's like you get that first initial reaction or thought right off there.
And this
And
is
then
all stuff you haven't seen before?
yeah, sometimes yeah, sometimes it'll be like, well, we're going to watch this movie like now, right? So it'll be like it'll be brand new. But yeah, we try to keep it fresh and try to have an anime that we didn't check out before. But because we watch a lot of animes, Didge has evolved the show where he's inviting guests who may not have watched any anime and having them watch it for the first time, and then he can have that conversation with them. So it's a really cool dynamic, because like I said, it's us also introducing people to anime, but also talking about it in depth and got kind of getting somebody like you just got introduced to this culture. What do you think? It's like so like that's pretty dope. And then Lib, he's a big collector. Like before, like we all have our collectors, side to us, but Lib is our big collector. And so, because he's a collector, he's already was watching unboxing videos and review videos. So he had a passion for that, and he was like, I want to do a review show. I want to kind of, talk about this and, why I like him. And I was like, yeah, bet. And then Bacardi, he's our heavy gamer. He plays indie games to top tier titles, and he'll play just the most randomest games. And because of that, we make sure that he's in charge of our Twitch. So he makes sure that we have some content going up there, group play, solo play, whatever the case may be. But we have Bacardi and friends on Twitch, so that way we can kind of get that going. So that's kind of the stuff that we're doing there. But we're also like, we stay in this content creation world. And so we have like 3 shows that we're developing behind the scenes. Our Patreon knows about it because we also, rely on Patreon. But it's really it's a fun time right now because we have our own studio, we have our own space. So the opportunities is like, oh, let's try this, and we're trying some of these other stuff too.
All of that is super exciting, and I'm so excited to see what else you guys have, behind the scenes that only Patreon knows about. So I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah.
So, and you talked about like some of your guests and things like that. So if people pop over to like, where can they find you? Like, where do you have everything? You mentioned Twitch.
Yeah. So for the most part, every social media that you can find us at is at Geekset Podcast, right? So that's everything. The only difference is Twitch is twitch.tv twitch.tv/Geekset. It's just Geekset. Because when we originally started, we started as a podcast and we was just audio. But as we grew and we became media and we started going to putting out video content and vlogs and all this, we realized that we're much more than a podcast. So that's why we call it the podcast the Megazord. That's when we all come together. We make sure that we pod and we talk about, just what's going on in the geek world and what we're geeking out about. But like all the other factions that go with it and everything, like I said, we they're not the podcast. So Geekset is the brand, and that's what we're trying to brand that, is for more to let people know, because one of our goals and ambition is to be like a BuzzFeed or be like a Complex, where it's Geekset, but there's all these other really dope nerds and blurs underneath us as well that rep that, and that we put them on random content videos. So you may not see Young Deuces on the video, but you may see this podcast collective that is really dope and they're affiliated with us, or this Twitch collective, or people like we want to get to that level where we can be that. We can help bring, more and more nerds and blurs throughout this, but put them in really dope content, stuff that they can have a footprint on. Like I said, like I see what BuzzFeed did and I like that, but it was like, I want to do it better, but full of nerds and blurs. Like I want that.
Yeah, I totally get that. We've been around since 2012, and we started as just a podcast, and I wasn't even around at that time. The podcast started out with a couple of guys becoming friends, and their podcast turned into a website from there, because it started to grow. And same thing, you start covering conventions and you start doing all of these things. And I think I came around 2016, and I don't know what happened, but I took over and like that was the end of it. Like I've been, just kind of in charge since, but we've grown to 4 different podcasts. We do, we have a web series called Portrait of a Fangirl. We do a lot of, cosplay is like a very big deal for us. Like we really care about cosplay and the cosplay community, and especially like the mental health of the cosplayers in the cosplay community. And so we do all these different things on the side, but like you said, it started off as a podcast, but now we're not just that anymore. So I really feel you there. And I always joke, I have like, do you watch Supergirl?
Yes, I do.
Cat Grant. I was like, that's my dream. One day I'll be like Cat Grant, right? Like, and it's, but kind of having that mentality of like wanting to grow and do different things and not being scared of like stepping outside of that little thing is so great,
Yeah.
because I've been able to like have people come in as contributors who just pop in every once in a while, or like, share their passion, with
Hmm.
us. And I'm so grateful for the people that have come in and have just been like, I'm really passionate about this and I need a platform and I just want to talk about it. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
please do. Please do. Like, we are
You know,
here for it.
during Black History Month was our first like big project that we did that was similar to that. So it's something that we took a heavy pride in, and it stemmed from not necessarily like not a dig at like I keep on bringing up BuzzFeed, but a lot of stuff that they do, I said I want to kind of do that, but I want to do it better. So the one thing I realized during Black History Month, I would look up all these companies. I was looking up Black History Month videos, and it was a lot of companies like BuzzFeed that was producing like, what does Black History Month mean to you? And I was like, but why is there no black owned company that's doing this? Right. And just, like I said, not a dig at BuzzFeed, but it was just a question that I had. And I said, well, why don't I do that? And so what I did was, and I brought it to the team, and they were all on board. And so we reached out to over 30 Blerds across the world, and we asked them 3 questions. We asked them, what does Black History Month mean to you? Um, Black History Month plus Blerd culture, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And what makes you proud to be Black? And we put together this 3-part series video that we ran through Black History Month. And we were so excited that we amplified so many Blerds from different walks of life. We had cosplayers, we had animators, we had podcasters, we had prominent people, that was Blerds that lived in Africa. We had Blerds that was part of the LGBTQ plus community. We had host. We had so many people, we did a press release with it. But what I loved about it is we made sure that everybody's information was there. We let everybody, and it's such a great video series that we did. But I felt, now I keep on saying, we felt so proud that we did something for Black History Month with all these Blerds, and then it led to just like heavy, like that's what I love about the geek community and the Blerd community, is it led to so much support and so much trust. So it's like, we announced that we're doing a documentary within our a recent interview that we did, and when we did that, it was, you've been in this content creation world a while, so you know how some people feel like, oh man, if Temple of Geek, if they got that, dang, that takes it away from me, and now I can't really support it. Like, that's how some people view it, right? And we got you kind of get used to like, oh, I'm gonna get some unnecessary hate if I make a good accomplishment. But when we did that video and we announced that we was doing that documentary, so many of the people that we worked with, so many Blerds, so many people of the nerd community reached out to say, yo, how can we support, how can we help? And I was like, this is beautiful. Like, this is something, it is so beautiful. And that's why we have so much pride about this culture, is because it's like, we talk about cosplay. I love going to conventions and seeing the cosplay, because no matter if this is your first time cosplaying, or if you're this person who spends thousands of dollars on your cosplay, you get the same type of love. And I love that. I love that you can put together a ragtag cosplay, like, hey, this is kind of my first one, and I did it right before I came here. And people will be like, yeah, still give you a high five and stuff like that, because the culture is just like, embrace it. Like, embrace it. I love gender bending cosplays. I love the crazy mashup cosplays. I love,
Yes.
and I think
And it's
that,
the only place you can be super niche, right? Like,
yes,
sometimes, like, you can take two different fandoms, mash them up, right? But somebody will get it. And you think
yeah,
you're like the only person out there who
yeah,
would understand this. But like, somebody's out there like, oh, I totally get that. And I always get post con depression, because I feel like a lot of times in society, in our regular lives, we have to like suppress the geek, right?
Yeah.
And then
Hmm.
for like a weekend at a con, you get to be unapologetically yourself.
Right.
Everyone's on the same page. Everyone's celebrating like fandom and
Yeah.
community and just pop culture in general. And so like when you go back and you're like, at home on Monday, you're just like, whoa, like it's not like I miss the con vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, obviously, like you guys are doing a lot, you're supporting a lot. I guess, where can people find you? Where can they support you? And,
Mhm.
where can they really check out everything?
So you can check out everything on our website, geeksetpodcast.com. And again, like I said, on all social medias at Geekset Podcast. And we have every individual creator that, that's on the podcast and at information underneath there. But as far as the support, so we have multitude levels of support that we ask for, right? And it's and a lot of them are free levels of support, but here's the biggest thing. So like right now the push is the Black Geek documentary. So we announced we did an interview with Forbes magazine, and we announced that we're doing a documentary called the Black Geek documentary. This is our first big project. And what it really stemmed from is when having these conversations with these celebrities about just being a geek and growing up geek. The one thing again, and it stemmed from being a Black geek. When we look at how the media portrayed the Black geek, they always kind of make, and even in geek culture though, and just in general, they always make a geek socially awkward, the person who can't get the guy or the girl, the butt of the jokes. And we realize having these conversations that though we love the Steve Urkels and the Carltons and stuff like that, that's not the number one representation of who we are, right? There's a lot of people like we often joke is like there's a lot of people if you hear Black geeks argue, Goku versus Naruto, like it sounds like a barbershop arguing Michael Jordan versus LeBron James. Like that's one of like we say that and that's what we bring. And it was like there's a level of swag that we bring to this. And it was like we want to make sure that we showcase that. But we also we still want to celebrate our heroes from the past. So I wanted to create a documentary that timelines the Black geek history, because even though the term Blerd has been around probably like 5 to 6 years, um, the culture has been with us for the longest. Like that we talked about the mashup, where you see a anime property, but they got like a hip hop swag to them. Growing up, when I was growing up, one of the big things that used to get airbrushed on shirts, it used to be like Mickey Mouse, but like a gangster Mickey Mouse
Yeah,
or
I
SpongeBob,
remember.
yeah, and that used to be a thing. But like we equate that to like blurred culture, like that was like that mashup. And I was like, I want to talk about that type of stuff. So we came up with like we want to do a documentary, and I was like, but I don't want to do it via Zoom. Like we do our show via Zoom and it still looks good, but I was like, I want to do an actual documentary. And so we came up with the budget. We got a GoFundMe out that we're utilizing, and the budget is allowing us to get top tier talent, because a lot of the people that we interviewed agreed to come back and be on screen to interview for the show. And these are some legends. And I was like, okay, great. So we can have them. We're going to film it at a Black Soundstage Studios. Our director is a Black director. So it's like a really Black experience, but it's going to be empowering, because, when we was mapping it out and talking about it, it was like, though we're talking about the Black geek, experience, we got to talk about why we love geek culture, why we love Japanese animation culture. Well, and talk about that stuff is because a lot of people, even for the longest, they didn't really think Black people really geeked out like that. It was always like a shocker. So it's like now, like I want to show that. I want to show like, no, it's not a shocker. We've been doing this. And so we got this documentary, the GoFundMe. Of course, that's level one support. But if you are not fortunate, not fortunate, if you don't have the means to donate, it's just as important to retweet, like, and comment when you see a post about the Black Geek documentary. It's also very, very, important to, check out the podcast, check out the interviews. Those are free. Join our Discord. That is free as well, where just be a part of this community. mention us, add us. We talk back on social media. It's the more that we can get the word out that we're working on something for the culture, by the culture, because we've been calling it a love letter to the Blerd community, and we truly want to showcase that. This documentary is our love letter to it, because we're gonna talk about our heroes. We're gonna talk about what the media, but we're going to talk about how we got to where we're at. But then we're also going to talk about the people that are changing the narrative now and the future and what we got to come and where we're going, and I can't wait until we get the funding, because I believe that once we do this is something that not only Blerd culture but geek culture is going to be able to be proud of. Have that moment that where it's like the world stops. Like, do you remember when the toys that made us first came out?
Yes.
How
Yeah.
everybody was like, yo, you gotta watch this. I want to recreate that. And that's the goal, because and I feel like that because the history of it, why we love Steve Urkel is because of how much he geeked out. Why we loved, the Black Ranger is because he was a Power Ranger and he was really cool, but he also danced. And it was like, yo, like, wait a minute. Like, it's like, so, but it was like, it's embedded in both cultures. And I want to show that combinedness of it. So yeah, this is our love letter to the Blerd community that we're excited to get out there.
It's inspiring. It sounds amazing. And also, I hope that, when people start, creators, people behind the scenes, people who are involved in the making of films, televisions, and things, when they realize what the demographics really do look like,
Yeah.
that they will start to kind of like open the doors, because thank goodness right now we're in a time where we're seeing a lot more, a lot more people of color, and and different gender identities and
Mm-hmm.
and things on television, which is great, and in films, which is great, but it's not enough. You know what I mean? And so, hopefully if somebody watches, your documentary, and they think, wow, like I didn't realize, and we start getting those doors open for us for all types of creators, and it's exciting to see things that really reflect who we are, who you are, who, Black nerds, what they look like, who they really are,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
No,
you
I'm
said, not
excited.
everybody's the Urkel. They're out there, and not everybody is.
You're right. Because it's funny because, like I said, Steve Urkel, for him to be cool, he turns to Stefan, but Stefan is also could have been well, he was. Remember, he still had Steve, or he still had Steve Smarts, so he still technically was a Blerd, but they tried to differentiate that, and in reality, it's one and the same. And so, like, that's what we want to show. We want to showcase that side. So I'm excited because also the tone of the toys that made us. Like, the documentary is not going to be this super serious. Like, it's going to have some serious aspects to it, but I do want to have that light, fun-heartedness, because I do want to also recreate, like you said, that con energy. I want that energy. I want people to be like, oh my god, yeah, oh, like, and what I love about it is also going to serve like kind of like a mini documentary, because a lot of the B-roll footage is going to be the footage that we've been covering C2E2, Crunchyroll Expo, anime expos, Comic Cons. So we have actual footage that we filmed from it. So it's going to be really dope to have these conversations with people and also use actual live footage from these conventions where people be like, oh man, I remember that, or whatever the case. And like, I'm just excited to bring this and have something that's the culture will be proud of.
Absolutely. It sounds amazing. We'll definitely share and support and make sure that our audience like knows that this is coming and can help support, because I think this is something noteworthy. I think it's, really smart and clever and thoughtful, and I'm excited for the world to see what you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to tell us?
First thing first, again, thank you guys so much for having us on there. So I am a I make it a point to also give people their flowers, make sure that people know that they're appreciated. And I told you, right off the rip that, we already been following you guys and we love this culture and everything that you guys contribute to the culture. I do appreciate, and your fans and your listeners and your readers and everybody, you guys have built such a dope community. And I applaud y'all for that, because as we started to grow and we started to think outside of a podcast, I started looking at different properties and how people built their communities and saying, okay, what can I borrow from them? How can I learn from them? And seeing what you guys do it definitely influenced a couple of things that we tried to do and that we're trying to do, with our brand. So, if anything, I've been on this kick of just telling people, make sure that not only, if you check us out and support us, but also support the original platform, which is your platform as well, because I want this culture to thrive in so many ways. And just like I want to be successful, I really want you guys to be successful as well and more
We
successful.
appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be at Anime Expo and we'll be at San Diego Comic-Con. So hopefully we can
Ooh,
meet in person
right.
and geek out and,
Yeah.
hang out. All right. Well, this is going to wrap up this episode of the Temple of Geek podcast. We want to thank Young Deuces for being here with us today. And if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to hit us up on Facebook or Twitter using the handle Temple of Geek. Do you want to check out some of our other episodes or shows? Why don't you head on over to templeofgeek.com. There you will find all sorts of content that pertains to the world of geek.